Every goal. Every game. Every kick of the ball live. From BBC Radio Scotland, this is Sportsound.
This is an audio download about Scottish football from BBC Scotland. I'm Kenny McIntyre. For terms and conditions of use, please go to our website, bbc.co.uk/sportscotland. Today's podcast is taken from BBC Radio Scotland's Sportsound programme of Wednesday the 14th of December. I was joined by Richard Wilson, Tom English, Graham Spears and Barry Ferguson. There was only one topic to debate, a topic that sparked a huge reaction throughout the day: the appointment of Malky Mackay as the performance director at the SFA. We're expecting him to be confirmed in post tomorrow morning. There's only one topic to debate tonight, a topic that has sparked a huge reaction throughout the day: the appointment of Malky Mackay as the performance director at the SFA. We're expecting him to be confirmed in post tomorrow morning. If you want your say tonight, please get in touch. Text us 80295 on Twitter at BBC Sportsound or tweet me at BBC Kenny Mac. We've already had a massive response to this. We'll get to that later in the programme. But let's kick off with a background to this story, Richard.
Yeah, it goes back to 2013. Malky Mackay guided Cardiff City to promotion to the Premier League in May. By the December he had been sacked, and the following year Cardiff City uncovered text messages containing discriminatory language on the phone of the club's former sporting director Ian Moody. It turned out that of around 9,000 texts on his phone, 3 had been exchanged with Mackay. 3 containing offending language had been exchanged with Mackay. And since then, Malky Mackay apologised straight away. But since then, he's been trying to rebuild his reputation. There was a stint at Wigan, a 5-month stint at Wigan, but otherwise, this has been an issue that has followed Malky Mackay around. We'll
hear from Malky Mackay in a few minutes' time. He was in the studio discussing the text back in March. But there has been an investigation into this whole affair.
Yeah, the English FA launched one in that year in 2014, and they released a statement on their findings the following year. I can quote some paragraphs from their statement at the time, but they looked at all aspects of the communications, including the context in which they were sent. Now, no disciplinary action was taken in light of the QC's finding that the communications were sent with a legitimate expectation of privacy. The FA spoke to both Ian Moody and Malky Mackay about the inappropriateness of terms used. Both individuals acknowledged that such terms are not acceptable. And Malky Mackay also voluntarily undertook equality and diversity training. The FA also investigated the conduct of both men during their time at Cardiff City and found that there was no findings against them in terms of the way they acted at the club. And they also ended up widening their investigation because there were concerns about the circumstances in which particular evidence was provided to the FA. They treated that with the utmost seriousness and liaised with external law enforcement agencies. At the time, Malky Mackay saw that as a vindication.
Right, before we hear from Malky Mackay, let's go round the table and gauge opinion on this.
I think it's going to be a very controversial appointment, Kenny, by the SFA. I wouldn't rush to endorse the appointment of Malky Mackay. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I can see it's a big risk and it's very controversial. I think some of the text messages that came out that he sent were vile and reflected very poorly on him. And he's going to be in a public place. He's going to have responsibility with footballers, youth footballers. So it's a big risk by the SFA. The risk is about perception, about content of character. I guess the question for me is, how long do you make this guy a pariah? For how long do you make him a leper? He's undergone re-education. He's shown some contrition. He's spoken well about it. So I think it's a risky appointment, very contentious, and maybe there's a case for saying, if there's risk involved in the appointment, maybe there's a case for saying the SFA shouldn't make it. Maybe they should make a concrete, risk-free appointment. This one certainly isn't that.
Do you agree, Tom? You've written a piece on this that's due to go up on the BBC website.
Yeah, I do. Look, Malky Mackay, the texts were unforgivable. They were awful. Everyone accepts that. He has apologised. For me, it looks like genuine contrition. He has expressed something close to shame for what he did. He has spoken about it numerous times. Now, if we don't accept his apology, then effectively we're saying to him, you've got no place in football. That we do not believe in forgiveness, we do not believe in redemption. We think that you are incapable of being redeemed. I think that's harsh. I think it's a harsh message to send out. Those who say that that he should not get this job, that then you're effectively saying that's a life sentence, that you don't belong in football anymore. I think that's way over the top. I do believe that if there's genuine contrition, genuine apology, a genuine attempt to better himself, and I think he's tried that, he's done that with going on this course, then there should be forgiveness. I understand why people are saying what they're saying.
So many, I'll get to them shortly. So many people getting in touch.
I completely understand it, but I think that's a pretty harsh and unforgiving outlook.
You know Malky Mackay well, Barry. What's he like? Does he deserve a second chance?
For me, 100%. I've known Malky 18 years. I first met him through the Scotland set-up. I've always kept in contact with Malky for the last 18 years. I'm not talking about week in, week out. It's a text message every 2 or 3 months to see how each other are doing. And I've spoke to him lately regarding this job. Now, I know it was 3 texts that were sent out to 9,000. I know it didn't look good on Malky, but Malky's went and done his sentence. He's went and worked for these organisations. And I seen today, show racism, a red card, kick it out campaign, come out clearly and back him. Now, he's done that for the last 3 years. So I think he's a good appointment. I know Malky, in terms of his playing career and his managerial career, he's had a good playing career at a good level. He's managed at a very good level down in England. And I don't see why not. He shouldn't get a second chance. He deserves it. He's been punished. He's been out of the game for a while now. And I think he's the ideal appointment for this role.
Yeah, we'll get to that statement you mentioned from Show Racism, the red card. One of our listeners tweeted in and said they should now rename themselves Show Racism, the yellow card. They're not at all happy with the response from them today.
But Malky is clearly known he's done wrong. Malky's went out and these organisations have let him come in, and he's went and done a lot of work.
But football people are going to stick together on this, aren't they?
I mean, Barry, with all due respect, I wouldn't. I find a lot of people say what you've said about Malky. People who know him testify, say he's a nice guy, genuinely nice guy. But I don't think you can use the phrase, this is an ideal appointment.
So
it's anything but that.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll get to that. Because I want to discuss about the text messages aside, right? And we're going to go through that in detail. But later in the programme, I want to discuss just purely on a football basis and what he's achieved in the game. Is he the right appointment? So we'll get to that one later in the programme. But let's hear from Malky Mackay. He was in the Sportsound studio in March.
You were accused, weren't you, of sending homophobic, racist texts? You were accused of all sorts of things that looked really, really bad, showing you in a very poor light.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this before in the programme, Kenny, that I've been in Scottish football for 10 years and English football for nearly 19 now, and a lot of people in football know me, know the type of person I am, and that's still the type of person I am. I'm not changed one bit. Sometimes you don't believe everything that you read in the papers. Various things have happened, but at the same time you've got to move on. I've had a lot of terrific phone calls from people in football. I had a terrific one from Gordon Strachan actually not too long ago, and Jim Fleeting at the SFA, throughout England as well. Alex Ferguson's been an absolute star. Kenny Dalglish has been the same. Graham Taylor, my ex-Watford chairman, the chairman of the FA, Howard Wilkinson. Real people that are well respected in the game. I lean on my own father. My father's been in football for 50 years. He's been at Queen's Park for 50 years, and last year was given an MBE to services to football. So him, Raymond Sparks, who's my football advisor, I've been with for 23 years. They stood firm with me through it all, as I would expect they would. And Richard Bevan of the LMA is standing firm next to me again, who's someone that's a very valued member of the English game. So, you learn from experiences.
So what you're saying is, since you've last been in this studio, that there's been an investigation by the FA in England, which we can touch on. What you would, I guess, say is that a lot of these things you're accused of, absolutely not true. You made mistakes, like we all do. You accept that, you've apologised for that, and it's now time to move on. Yeah, well, at the time there was 10,000 texts on someone else's phone, and I was party to 3 of them out of 10,000. And you absolutely make mistakes and things that you say that you shouldn't. Shouldn't do. So basically, there were 3 texts there that you sent or were involved in that you're not proud of. It was the wrong thing to do.
Without a doubt, absolutely.
absolutely without a doubt. I think I said the last time we were in, the investigation was ongoing at that point, and I couldn't talk about that either.
Yes.
But they since put a statement out.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, they put a statement out towards the end of last year, exonerating you and Ian Moody, and there's an interesting couple of final paragraphs in it that I'll quote from. It says the investigation has been lengthened considerably due to serious concerns about the circumstances in which particular evidence provided to the FA had been given, reliability and completeness of that evidence. The nature of these concerns, which the FA treats with the utmost seriousness, has necessitated significant further inquiries by the FA and the liaison with external law enforcement agencies. I mean, that's a pretty clear sort of message towards the end of that. So you feel, in a sense, you've come out the other side of this?
Yeah, I mean, I was vindicated in that, and they decided that there was other avenues that they needed to investigate, and I would say to people, read it again and read it for a third time. It's about making sure that you think, right, okay, take a breath, get up and get on with it, because there's a lot of people here in football that still value you, and make sure that you keep going. Everyone has issues, everyone has problems in life, and it's about what you do about it. It's about getting up and getting on with things again and working hard and doing the hard graft, and eventually things change and things turn. It's not about all of a sudden you have any lack of talent. It's about making sure, okay, what am I going to do now to actually make myself better, educate myself further? So you could sit in a hole and be bitter your whole life. You've got to put it in a perspective as to who it is that's shouting at you. Just like social media, who is it that's actually throwing this line out against you? Number one, never met you before. Number two, they've maybe read something in the paper or on the web. Number three, might not even be a football fan. And number four, they've never ever come up to me in the street and wanted to talk to me like that. So, you put it in perspective, the amount of people that are actually talk to you in general every day.
Right, Malcolm Mackay, they're speaking to us in March. He mentioned social media, so many people getting in touch. Matthew Leslie sends out the wrong message that a man of racist, anti-Semitic and misogynistic views can get top job with the SFA. The Snowman seems rather uninspiring, however at least seems to be more personable than McClare, which isn't hard. Craig Smith, it sets a terrible example. The SFA will have no credibility in any future anti-discrimination campaigns. Paul Andrew Martin, were they really his views, or was it the wrong reaction after being backed into a corner by crazy ownership? Jim Douglas says, ridiculous decision. SFA obviously not content at being a major embarrassment over Strachan, decided to step it up. Oz says it's poor. I could also guarantee subpar performances and unwanted controversy for half the money. Hashtag SFA shambles. And Eric Day says, just what Scottish football needed. Another racist homophobe, a chance to change, missed again. Is anyone surprised at the reaction?
No, I mean, it's obviously a very contentious issue, and people are right to be reacting that way to the language of the text messages. I mean, I think the point of where we're at now is this didn't happen yesterday. You get a feeling for somebody. We've sat down with Malky Mackay twice in the studio, Kenny. I believe that he has come through the other side of this with a better understanding of who he is. I think he is genuine in his contrition. He has sought out re-education with the FA, and I think that's why the two major anti-racism campaigns in football support his potential appointment. You can only go by what the gut feeling that you get with somebody, and I think if you feel that he has served a punishment, if he has come through this as a better person, then you have to give him a chance to get on with his career and his life. I think that's it. I don't get the distinction between working for the SFA and working for a club. I don't understand that. I'm not sure why there's a difference between people who can say you can become a club manager and not have a role with the governing body. And I don't think that because he sent these text messages that reflects on the SFA's discriminatory or placed in the anti-discrimination network of the responsibility that it has. He's come through that, and he's come through the other side of that. All of these bodies are based on re-education.
I mean, all of the people who said that this is a disastrous appointment, it's a shameful appointment, it's not the right appointment, it sends out the wrong message. Okay, fine. But the logical conclusion of that then is that Malky Mackay, football has got to wash their hands of Malky Mackay. If you follow it through to the logical conclusion, these people are saying that he should have no job in football anyway.
Maybe not, Tom. Maybe a stepping stone. Maybe this is too soon for a position like this.
But what job would be acceptable?
There may be ones out there where he's not going to be involved, say, speaking to kids, for example.
But listen, I mean...
But as the manager of a football club, he would be. I mean, I don't get the distinction between the governing body.
A lot of people are saying he should be in a job of this status.
I get the distinction between it, because I just think... I mean, it's only 1 degrees, but The SFA is the governing body of football. It has been called the custodian of the game, and it's responsible, I think, more than the clubs are. In fact, I would say this is glaringly obvious. The SFA is responsible more than the clubs are for promoting values within the game. So custodians of the game, values of the game, some people might think that's a lot of baloney, but historically, that was one of the foundation principles of the SFA.
But are they not showing that rehabilitation is possible?
Rehabilitation might be another value, but all I'm saying is I do think. Listen, I said at the beginning, of course Malky Mackay can't be a leper for the rest of his life. Of course not. But that's why the SFA thing I think is significant, because they're called the custodians of the game. They promote fair values in the game. The clubs don't stand for that. The clubs stand for themselves.
No,
for
the clubs do stand for it, or they like to say that they stand for
but they don't, Tom, do they?
But they have to.
We've had recent evidence they clearly don't stand for promoting fair values. They're in it for number one.
Yeah,
the SFA is in it to make sure integrity goes throughout the game. They're held accountable by guys like you and me, and if you get it wrong, my goodness, there's hell to pay.
All clubs are held accountable. I mean, they're all held.
I think there's a greater emphasis on the SFA, and that's why this is controversial.
I think no matter where Malky Mackay ended up, it would have been controversial. I mean, admittedly, the CSFA role, the performance director role, has probably intensified that. But no matter where he came back in, if it was in Scotland, there would be a big reaction, a negative reaction. Whether he was a manager of a club, I think the fans of that club would react very negatively.
Well, there is a big reaction tonight. Keep your thoughts coming. I would say at the moment, over 90% of the responses have been negative. Let's hear from the SNP MSP, Claire Hockey.
Scottish football's made a huge effort to tackle racism and homophobia in sport and to promote women's football, and they're to be applauded for that. But it's deeply concerning that a manager who admits that he made comments that were disrespectful of other cultures and dismissed those conversations as friendly text banter is being widely tipped as the favourite for a key role in the SFA. I think such an appointment would risk sending a message that such behaviour is no barrier to a top job in Scottish football. A terrible message to young players of tomorrow. They would be overseen by the performance director, and that role is key in overseeing performance strategy and the development of male and female players. Young people look to football for role models, and one of the most important jobs in Scottish football is not the place for someone who felt these conversations were an acceptable part of football culture. The SFA really needs to see sense and rule out this appointment.
MSP Claire Hockey there, Barry. Does she raise some valid concerns? What about the message she's sending out to kids? Make a mistake, a really bad mistake, and that's it. Regardless of re-education, there's no way back.
I disagree with that. I keep going back to it. Malky's apologised. What more do people want? Do they want him to just forget about him? Listen, you need to know the guy. I don't know if the guys in this studio know him.
Met him in here a couple of times. And I have to say, he was also very helpful. See, when you work down in the clubs at England, you're getting
one of the most honest
one of the programmes. Very
similar
helpful.
As a player, one of the most honest guys you'll ever meet. And when I listen to an interview with Malky, I know he's telling the truth. I know he's so apologetic. So why not give him another chance? I know it's a major role. And I know it's a role that we need to get right because of the structure that's in place and just now clearly isn't working up here, the pro youth system. But for me, why not give him a chance?
I don't know Malky Mackay. I've never spoken to Malky Mackay, so I'm not coming from this as a mate of his talking him up.
And I'm not just saying this.
No, I know, Barry. No, I'm not saying that. No, I didn't mean to imply that at all. But what the point I'm making is that I'm coming to this with a clean slate. You know, I just. And I think it's imperative that people are mindful of what they're saying and that they are saying the accurate things.
What about politicians jumping in then?
Claire Haughey there, SNP MSP. Her overall point I can understand, and it's reflected by many, many people. But she said there that Malky Mackay had texted these things, and then later he had dismissed them as banter. He didn't. That's not true. That comment about banter came from a League Managers Association statement, which was a disastrous statement. It was terrible. It actually did more harm to Malky Mackay than good, and they subsequently retracted it and they issued another statement. But that word banter, that never came from Malky Mackay, and Claire Haughey should know that. Throwing that into the mix, it doesn't help the situation because it's a false accusation.
Yeah, although he did think it was banter. That's part of the complexity of this. He didn't say it. He didn't say it at the time. He believed it was banter. When he was rumbled, in I think an unkind way, which Richard alluded to, Tan and the regime at Cardiff had it in for him. He then had to do a mea culpa and be full of contrition. At the time, he thought it was banter. That's the odd thing about this. I believe you, Barry. I know guys who know Malky Mackay say he's a smashing guy, a really decent guy, an honest guy, a hard-working guy, and side by side with that are these vile messages that he sent, which, frankly, at the time he did think was banter. He doesn't now because he's been caught out.
Well, I mean,
and he's held his hands up, and in his decency, he said, "You know what? It was really wrong what I did, but I've moved on." And you know that. So
surely that's the point. At the time, it was mindless nonsense that and whatever racist, anti-Semitic, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
It was mindless stuff that was going on. But once the light was shone on him, I think he realised, hang on a second, this is pretty ugly stuff.
But what I like about Malky, he's no hid for the fact that he was wrong. He's went and done the stuff with these organisations to try and show people that he's really sorry. And fair play to him, I like that. He's went and done quite a lot of work over the past 3 years, a hell of a lot of work that I know.
Yes.
And I've spoke to him about it. I know people who are in these organisations. In 3 years he's done it solid to prove that he's not a racist or he's not a sexist.
You're an example. You made a mistake. You made a high-profile mistake.
Well, it's going to live with me for the rest of my days.
And you've apologised. You've tried to turn it around.
People come on social media and say, he's not telling the truth. And Malky's getting the same sort of stuff that's going on with me. It's until somebody actually knows me that I did make a silly mistake and admitted it and I was totally wrong. But some people just can't get away from the fact that I feel for him because I know the situation he's in. I've been in not a similar situation, but the stuff that happened to me with Scotland.
And do you feel you can't change people's opinions?
No. Some people.
You can't escape something like that, can you?
No.
It just becomes I mean, Michael Grant in the Times today said that Malky Mackay, whether we like it or not, is defined by this episode.
Yeah,
and
it's a really good piece.
And you feel you're partly defined by this daft thing you did that night, you know, and all the other good things you've done are ignored, you know.
But the point is, he does need to have that opportunity, I think, to move beyond that definition and show that he can move beyond.
But there's a parallel, but there's something worth mentioning here, and it's about the redemption story. Lee Griffiths, 2 or 3 years ago, Lee Griffiths was in a dark place in his career, in his life. He had 2 police charges against him, one for the Rudy Scatchell refugee thing in the pub in Edinburgh, the other one for getting in a really ugly Twitter spat with the guy and allegedly racially abusing him. And he was slammed by his parent club at the time for the first one for Wolves, and by Hibs where he was on loan, and for the Rudy Scatchell one, he was charged and he was admonished in court. He admitted guilty to using discriminatory language, and he was admonished in court. Now, at that time, he was just a Celtic player. A lot of Celtic fans that I know didn't want anything to do with Lee Griffiths. They said, we do not want this type of guy at our football club. There were even banners, 1 or 2 banners, alluding to that at Celtic Park. But he goes out, he scores goals, he comes on television, he shows people again and again and again that A, he's a good footballer, and B, he's a better bloke, that he has learned, that he has matured, that he's learned the lesson. Now he's the kind of the bastion for the redemption song. But the problem for Malky Mackay, he doesn't have that opportunity. Lee Griffith scores all these goals and wins all these awards and wins trophies for Celtic, and everyone loves him. Malky Mackay can't go out and score goals or win trophies. So where is his opportunity to win people over? Right. And I fail to see where the opportunity is for him to win.
Barry mentioned earlier just the show races and the red card statement. We should read that out, Richard. You've got that there.
Yeah, they said earlier on today that after admitting to sending text messages that were very regrettable and disrespectful to other cultures, Malky Mackay underwent equality and diversity training through an education programme with the FA, and we wish him well in his new role at the SFA. I should also say that Lord Ousley, the founder and chairman of the Kick It Out anti-racism group, he said he believed Mackay now had a better understanding of diversity issues and deserved a second chance. And he said that the new role would give him an opportunity to, and I quote here, put himself back in a state where he can prove that he is a good person and a person capable of performing both in football terms and how he treats people.
Right, let me read out more comments from our listeners. Russell Abercrombie, this is one I alluded to earlier. Show racism the red cards, you change your name to show racism the yellow card after that statement. Dave Robertson, ridiculous hypocrisy from the SFA. Show racism a yellow card and send it on a training course. He had a job at Wigan since. This is representing the nation now. No way he should do that. Abs 1888, we should be allowed redemption, but the SFA had better people previously and the system strangled them. We're going to discuss the role and whether Malcolm Mackay, from a footballing perspective, fits that role later in the programme. Colin Little says, disgraceful appointment, classic jobs for the boys mentality at the SFA. Racism is not a mistake, it's a choice, according to Colin. Octorada Chippy says, poor decision, redemption shouldn't come in the form of a top job. Derek Duncan, if a headmaster appointed a teacher with proven racist, homophobic, misogynistic opinions, the headmaster would be sacked. Yet the SFA put the teaching of our kids in the hands of an individual who finds this funny. And Hutch says, this is an interesting one again, this came up on social media a lot earlier. Hutch says Hugh Dallas was sacked for less by the SFA.
Yeah, well, I think that's a difficult one for the SFA. I mean, you could argue that Hugh Dallas was asked to move on for a relative triviality compared to this case involving Malcolm Mackay. So that's one thing they have to face up to. I do think the opinion of the anti-racism bodies is significant and carries weight. I mean, these organisations deplore bigotry and racism, and they are endorsing the SFA's move for Malcolm Mackay. So I think that is significant. There's a separate thing for me, Kenny, which is a kind of political issue. Apart from the moral issue here, there's an issue here of, in this job, can the SFA afford to make a very risky appointment, or a contentious appointment, or a controversial appointment? And in that sense, I'm not convinced they can afford to do that. I think they need to make a sure, safe appointment, because this role has been rocked back and forward between Mark Votta, Brian McClare. I hope we're not going to have a whole list of here today, gone tomorrow characters. This is a risky, contentious appointment. In the circumstances, politically, can the SFA afford to do that? They're deciding they can do. And I think that's dubious.
But what about if they're looking at the list of candidates and if they think that Malcolm Mackay is streets ahead of the others?
What is the list of candidates?
Well, again,
the great controversy around it remains. I mean, I was going to say, Tom, if I had any power at the SFA and I was appointing Malcolm Mackay, I think there will have to be very compelling reasons of his quality to appoint him. Given this background, really compelling.
Well, they must have.
And if not.
Because the SFA, for all their faults, they're not gullible. They know what the reaction was going to be. None of this will have taken them by surprise.
Yeah, they had to decide that he was the best man for the job, knowing that all of this would be part of it, and knowing that it would be an awful lot easier to appoint somebody else. Yeah. So you have to read into that. The logic of that is that they have decided he is the best candidate, and so despite the episode that follows him around and how that reaction will be, they're going to appoint him. So he must have been a much better candidate than the other ones. I mean, there were a few people in for the job, but it's a matter of public record that it certainly looked as though it came down to Malcolm Mackay and Austin McPhee.
Yeah, I want to mention that, Richard. That's a good point. Some text coming in here, Malky and all the folk complaining they should get a life. What he did was trivial, and I don't remember anyone seriously being offended. PC gone crazy, says this person. Jimmy in Edinburgh, it's starting to sound like Malky is a victim. Is it only football fans who get life bans? Sorry, but because his racist and homophobic sentiments were meant to be in private, makes him all the more reprehensible. That's from Jimmy in Edinburgh. And one here saying, notwithstanding how offensive Mackay's texts were, anyone who would text in that way is an idiot, plain and simple. Is this the best we can do? Gavin on Twitter, Tom, says Austin McPhee was the other candidate who has a good player development record. Mackay has no history of that.
Yeah, and I think Austin McPhee would have got the job if he wanted it, but he didn't want it. He went with Hearts instead, and that shows you we're going on to the second part of this debate about how appealing the job is. Well, I would say not great when Austin McPhee has gone for the number 2 job, the number 3 job really. If you look at Levine, Cathro, and McPhee at Hearts, rather than take the performance director of the SFA role.
Do you think, Barry, that's because everyone knows how difficult this is? Mark Votta had a goal, Brian McClare lasted 15, 17 months, something like that. Do you think this is a job that seems almost an impossible job to get the clubs, to get everyone on board?
I don't think it's an impossible job. I think it's an important job. We need to get the right man, and it's clear that the system we have in place just now isn't working, the pro youth system. It's clear. I think we need to go back, and I know speaking with Malky a few days ago, he's wanting to personally go around all the clubs and get their views on it, and then go back and sit down and maybe revamp it, going back to the days where it was reserve football, where these young kids at 16, 17 are playing against guys who are not playing in the first team on a Saturday. They'll play against them in the reserve league on a Monday, Tuesday, say, but they're playing against guys who have got first team experience, 27, 28-year-olds. I think that's a problem we have with the under-20 system. These young kids from 10-year-old that go through the system, go full-time and go into the under-20 league, they're still playing against the same boys they played with at 10-year-old, 11-year-old. It's not working.
They've identified a gap between, and we'll go on to talk about this, but they have identified a gap between the ages of 17 to 21 where players' development is effectively stalling because they're not getting the right competition in matches, whether it's first team or whether it's against
I've had
season
experience.
pros.
I've took a couple of guys out the pro years, out the under-20 league, and they've come into the second division, and I've had to send them back early because they're clearly not ready. They look good players in the under-20 league, but they're not getting. They're playing against guys at their own age. They're not getting the experience of playing against guys who maybe are out the first team with lack of form or an injury. They need to be playing against guys who have experienced first team football,
Make
and
them
that's
more
the problem.
streetwise.
And that's one of the things that Malky's want to try and bring back.
What is the remit? What is required of the performance director?
Well, I mean, this was obviously the role that Mark Votta did first. It's essentially managing, overseeing the development pathway in Scottish football for the elite players. One of the buzzwords about this current review, or one of the buzz phrases about this current review, is that it's about elite performance, not participation. So this isn't about all the kids playing football in Scotland. This is about the very best players, and there being a development pathway from them, from the club academies, from the SFA's regional performance schools, through the national team setup, and getting into first team squads, getting into the national squad. So it's about ensuring that the structure is there across the country to develop players, develop elite players, and raise the number of players who are playing in Scottish clubs' first teams, playing for the Scottish national team, going abroad to play top-class football. That is overseeing that development pathway. At the moment, there is a review, and certainly the final candidates on the shortlist as part of their selection process, they had to review the Project Brave review, as it's being called, because I think there's a realisation, Barry's touched on some of them there that Malky's mentioned to him, there's a realisation, whatever, at 5 years in to the performance development pathway, that it's just not quite working. It's working in stages, but that final stage is not quite working, and so they're trying to find a way to tweak it in a sense, to develop it a bit further.
It's clearly not working. Look at Gordon Strachan, for instance. He can't call in any of the under-21s. Look at the under-21s, for instance, that Scott Gemmels took over. They're getting beat every time, 3 or 4-0, and that's no disrespect to the young kids, but it's clearly not working, and we need somebody to come in and change it and start producing, because I believe still watching 15, 16-year-old boys, there is a lot of good players, but they're not getting the right development.
It's an important job. I also think it's a terrible job. I think it's a job. It's a dead end job. When you look at what Stuart Regan said when Brian McClare left the position, he said that McClare got frustrated because he was spending more and more time lobbying and presenting in the boardroom. He said the complexities of the role cannot be overestimated. I look at Malky Mackay's career, and I don't see the person that Stuart Regan thinks he needs. I see this position again. Malky Mackay is going to have to lobby and present in the boardroom.
I think
he's becoming an administrator.
A
politician.
I wrote about that just today. He's going from football management, football coaching into an entirely different environment, which is administration. That's what he's doing. I think Stuart Regan's remarks, reflect back on the recruitment process for Brian McClare, because all of those things are a key aspect of the job. However, if you look at Malky, again, we've spoken to him in here a couple of times. Barry knows him. You speak to people in football. He is very good. He's an excellent networker. He's very good with people. He builds relationships. He's got contacts right. I mean, the number of people who have stepped up in recent weeks to endorse him as a candidate in this process: Mark Warburton, Brendan Rodgers, Derek McInnes. That's the public ones. There have been others in private who've gone to the SFA and said, "This is your man." Now, you don't get to that point if you don't have a certain skill set. And I don't mean that they're looking at Malky Mackay and saying he's definitely the right man for the job just because he's got a good relationship with them. They are making a judgment call on his abilities, but he has the capability, I think, of going into boardrooms and lobbying. The difficulty for the job is, I think, that there's so many competing aspects to it. You might have a head of the academy at one club who thinks something, and the chief executive at his club thinks something completely different. It's a really difficult place to go.
There are too many
That's the big challenge.
Too many voices.
I do think he's got the personal qualities. That's one thing I would say. He's got the personal qualities to do that.
But Richard, is it not the case that, Tom, you've alluded to this, it's the performance director, it's an important job, but essentially a dull job. Malky Mackay has wanted to be a football manager. And he's been a very good football manager, an outstanding football manager, you could argue, in the 3 or 4 years he had. He's now... There's a more than a hint that he's taking this gig because he can't get any other one.
Yeah, a
and
few people suggested that, yeah.
So it's got nothing like the week-in, week-out excitement or emotion of football management. So he's taking this slightly dull job for a strategist or a politician. Will he do 2 or 3 years in the job? Does he have the character and the capability to do that? Or when he gets an opening, will he jump ship and go back into where the real excitement is, which is football management?
Right.
That will be a concern many people will have.
Let me get to more of the comments from our listeners. Graham McConsky, slap in the face to other up-and-coming coaches to appoint someone like him, putting aside his views. His record isn't exactly stellar. Classic jobs for the boys, SFA decision. Stephen Lang, he's a sexist, homophobic, racist and shouldn't have been employed. Andrew Shearer, similar. How can this misogynist, bigot and general scumbag... This is a feeling from our listeners tonight. Get a roll at this. It's a bad example. Colin Clement says, typical and embarrassing. Gaz, DUFC, away from the obvious issues which should have blocked his appointment, he is just uninspiring on one of the boys. And Ian Small, some things should never be forgiven, and he is guilty of most of them. Shameful appointment in a high-profile role. What about the timing of this? How on earth did the SFA get this through?
I've got a point to make. I know for a fact the Scottish FA, the English FA and the Welsh FA, on the pro licence, Malky has went to each of them associations and done plenty of lectures on the pro licence, which is the biggest badge you can get in football. So that tells you what people think about him.
So do you think the only real resistance to Malky Mackay is from the general public? Do you think people in football, at football clubs, they will welcome him and they will do everything they can to help him in this, as we're all saying, very difficult role? Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think he should get the job. But I mean, speaking to him, he's so enthusiastic about what to come up and try and help Scottish football, try and help progress the young kids coming through and make sure that we bring more kids through. Because, being quite honest, what's happened since the last 5 years? What's really come through?
When you read out some of these texts, Kenny, there's almost this hellfire Bible bashing.
I'm trying to give people a flavour. That's what's coming through, and that's ones I feel I can read out.
There's a kind of hellfire indignation, hell-mendum.
Yeah. How do the SFA counter that? How does Malky Mackay counter it?
As a society, we're kind of supposed to have moved on from some of that righteous indignation.
I wonder. I mean, look, Twitter is full of reactionaries. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, you know, probably a lot of people out there as well who think, do you know what, this man deserves another chance. But they're less likely to go on Twitter and say that.
Yeah.
But the people who think that he should be burned at the stake are more likely to go on Twitter. So I wouldn't use Twitter as the Bible here. I mean, I think there are a wide range of views out there, and some of them will agree with us around the table here that yes, he has done wrong, but he has admitted he's done wrong. He's been contrite.
Can you understand those that are angry at this, Tom? Can you understand that some of the feelings out there?
I can understand. Of course, I can understand them. I don't understand anyone who's calling him these pejorative terms as scumbag. I mean, that's just somebody with their hair on fire, and they should calm down and look at it properly. Of course, there's criticism to be levelled at him. Of course, there is. But I just go back to what I said earlier. Is this a life sentence? Are we writing him off?
Well, Andy Nair has got in touch. Give Malky a break. A life sentence for 3 stupid texts to a stupid pal. That's from Andy Nair. Kate McNulty from Turriff. The problem with professional footballers is they're supposed to be role models. If kids follow from them, what chance have they got? Says Kate.
I don't think on this appointment, Kenny. I don't think there's a clear right or wrong on this. To be honest, I think it's so mired in the controversy of it. We're kind of agreeing here. Words like a lifetime leper and pariah and redemption that Tom mentions, there's a kind of consensus that we need to forgive and give the guy a chance. But it's clear to me, as well as some of these hotheads out there, it's clear that there are many perfectly cerebral, balanced people, reasonable, rational people who think it's a deplorable appointment. And we can't escape that. You just can't escape that. So, yes, there are bigots and hotheads out there, but I've seen on Twitter very rational, decent people who think it's a deplorable move by the SFA. We can't shy away from that.
Yeah, Matthew Rosser, jobs for the boys, horrible appointment, it will end in disaster. Another one here, friends in high... That's from him as well, sorry. Friends in high places, better people not wanting to work with Stuart Reagan. SFA are failing our game. No ambition, no appetite to improve the facilities. No desire to think outside the box. Pathetic, says Matthew. Malcolm, 1983. What's the point in punishing someone if you don't allow for or recognise rehabilitation? If we don't recognise rehab, we as a society are sending out the wrong signal to those trying to learn from mistakes. It would be a worse signal, Tom, he's saying, to favour polarisation and ostracisation over education and rehabilitation.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the guy, if Malky Mackay had not accepted any blame for this and had been bolshy, I would say hell mend him, because he wouldn't have shown the degree of learning and appreciation that he's stepped out of line in a quite spectacular and offensive way. But he has shown all of those things. I just think it's very hard to support somebody who says, no, keep flogging him. I mean, if he's holding up and saying, I'm sorry, you keep hitting him over the head.
And we've all made mistakes. I mean, there's got to be a chance to turn it round, isn't there?
There are players all around the world, at clubs all around the world, who at one time or another have stepped out of line in a similar type way. But they have been forgiven by their club's supporters, if the player is good enough. If he does a good enough job, and this is a kind of twisted morality of this as well. Mm-hmm. You know, if a player bangs in 50 goals a season, they kind of forgive something that he's done before. I think it's a very basic point here. The guy has admitted he did wrong. Give him another chance. I have huge reservations about his success in this job. But then again, I have huge reservations about anybody's success in this job. But I will defend his right to have a crack at it.
He has got backing from some big hitters, some high-profile managers in Scottish football, Richard.
Yeah, in the past few weeks, Brendan Rodgers, Mark Warburton and Derek McInnes have all gone on the record with their support for Malky Mackay. And as I say, there are other people, high-profile people in the game who have done that privately. Mark Warburton had a press conference today. Now, he worked beside Malky Mackay. He was the assistant academy director at Watford when Malky Mackay was the Watford manager. So they do have a personal relationship. And he said today, I know Malky very well. He's a football man through and through. I've read some shocking statements about Malky. I get very disappointed when I see people copy and pasting articles from 3.5 years ago. I think that's lazy journalism. But I do know Malky's integrity. I know he's an honest football person. I've watched him work with young players and old players, and he's a first-class football man. Very knowledgeable, very articulate, good on the grass, good in the boardroom. He's a very smart guy, and I know he'll do a great job for the SFA. Has he got the organisational skills? Is he smart enough? Absolutely. But it's a long-term project by the very nature of its title.
I didn't. I mean, I found what Mark Warburton seems to me quite a decent bloke. I found what he said about it, lazy journalism, absurd. Totally absurd. What's he talking about? Are we not... You know,
he's just hitting his glasses on. The hands up there. I'm trying to describe this scene. Come on.
The elephant in the room here is this controversy and baggage surrounding this appointment. And Mark Warburton is saying to guys like Tom and me and Richard, how ridiculous of you to even address it. You know, and then he talks about going back 3.5 years. We're going back 3.5 years to cut and paste journalism. He goes back 8 years to when he was with him at Watford when they worked together.
He's undermined his own point.
Are we supposed to ignore that? I found it utterly foolish from Mark Warburton.
Well, yeah. I mean, I shouldn't be laughing, but the lazy journalism thing is bonkers one to me. I don't get that. What are we supposed to do? Analyse Malky Mackay's appointment without looking back at the text message scandal? That's?
I mean, we would have to judge him by looking at his managerial career, but just forget
all the other stuff.
Well, the big talking point there is a few more tweets.
Well,
here.
in that case, Mark Warburton should forget about the Joey Barton flare-up and bring him back to the club because it's irrelevant.
There's another talking point. Andy Morris on Twitter: inappropriate appointment on day that the historic abuse review was announced. SFA once again out of touch. Glasgow Hammy, he deserves his chance. Good luck to him. Jim Smith, get a grip. People say things in private that they don't mean all the time. Graham Powery, appalling appointment. You don't give someone a job because they're available. Philip Campbell, shocking, gives off an incredibly poor message to women, kids and minorities. And Aelred82, Graham saying, a joke like the SFA, unsuitable personality, and he only wants a job because he's toxic to clubs.
Well, I think that, listen, we've sufficiently aired the complex moral debate around this, and there's a public perception issue here, and there's a suitability issue, which is as clear as day. It's glaring, and it has to be addressed. Side by side with that, I'm also intrigued by this issue. I know what Malky Mackay has got in terms of quality as a manager, because he's proved it. What I'm not aware of, what I'm struggling to find evidence for, is his proven ability as a strategist and a nurturer of young footballers and
how much of that's down to him,
a cerebral pathway.
Is he delivering something that's actually already been agreed? How much input does he have?
No. I think, and in fairness, the SFA had a decision to take when Brian McClare left, and they were conducting the review. They could have stopped the review and waited until they appointed the performance director, then restarted it and taken it from there. It would have been a much more of a blank canvas for the incoming performance director. They decided to run the two things side by side. The review is taking place. I've seen the document. It's 22 pages long. There's lots of recommendations in it. At the end of this process, it will not be exactly the same. This has just been a working group with, I think, 8 clubs represented on it. They will then present their recommendations to the rest of the clubs. There will be a back and forth about some of the recommendations, whether some clubs are for them, whether they're against them. So this is just a process. He's not starting with a blank sheet of paper, and these are not implemented until 2018. But at the same time, I think if he'd sat in the interview and said, look, that review's a joke, none of it's going to work, he wouldn't have got the job, because they are part-way committed to some of it. It's not that radical. I mean, some of the recommendations are about the Reserve League. Barry talked about that. The possibility maybe of introducing colt teams, the main one is reducing the number of performance elite academies funded by the SFA so that they can focus the amount of investment that they're putting into that side of the game onto the academies that produce the most players. So to get the funding, you've got to show that you've produced the most players. I think the stat was they want more than 40% of first teams to have Scottish players, or more than 40% Scottish players in the first teams of Scottish clubs. And there will be points and rewards for clubs that develop young talent. He is not on the grass every day coaching young players. That's not the job. The job is putting the structures in place, putting the targets in place, managing the people who deliver that. That's the role.
Brian McClare chucked it.
But Richard,
he absolutely wasn't cut out for that side.
But Richard, that comes back to my question. If the question is asked, I think Malky Mackay will be a very good performance director for the SFA for these reasons. A, B, C, D. What are they? What are they?
I agree with you.
I would say probably...
Who's on the board, the actual board, who's deciding these 8 points?
I don't have all the names in front of me.
Or is it people within?
So
it's not people
Celtic are
within the
represented,
SFA?
Rangers are represented.
Hamilton Accies, I think.
Hamilton are on it, Hearts are on it, Falkirk were on it until their employee moved. I think there's 8 clubs represented. They're mostly the elite clubs.
So basically the clubs are dictating what's going to be happening.
And that's the problem, isn't it?
That's the problem for me. I think
it's in conjunction with
if you have
the
a
SFA,
performance director, he has got to decide what happens. Not the clubs.
And do you honestly think that's going to be that's going to be the outcome? Do you think that's going to be allowed?
It can only be implemented if the clubs agree, but that's the whole
Why
point.
did Brian
And
McClare chuck it?
I
So
go,
why
well,
do you
I
need
go,
a
I go
performance
back,
director
I go
then?
back to the point. And Brian McClare was. I went down and interviewed him. He was Manchester United's academy manager for a long time. He knew that business. He knew what it was to develop young players. But he was the wrong person for this job. Because this job isn't running at a club where you decide what happens. Your word is law. You decide it's going to be that way. That's the way it happens.
Yeah.
This is not the performance director's role. The performance director has to, in effect, bring all the clubs together, bring Scottish football together, and find a way that everybody buys into.
So what evidence do we believe there is, to repeat the question, what evidence do we believe there is that Malky Mackay has proven ability in this regard? I hope it's beyond, well, he gave a good interview.
There can be...
He gave a good interview.
Does it look an attractive job when you see the list of people that were linked with the job? It did.
No.
Would you say it was high profile, high class?
No, it's not, because
It's a dull job.
it's a labyrinthine network that you have to negotiate your way through, and you know you need the combined diplomacy of Kofi Annan and Boutros Ghali to get this gig to work properly. It's
And you also don't
I think
really
that's
see
our first
results.
mention in Sportsound.
You don't, it's not,
He sounded like Archie McPherson. I'm sorry to say.
It's not like in a year's time, whoever takes the job on, not like in a year's time they can say, well, here's what we've achieved.
Exactly. That's
There
one of the
is
problems.
no results.
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
one
other
of-
part of it. So
How
how you get to
long
the
then?
end of it?
Okay, there's another question. Is it a concern that Malky Mackay would jump ship at the first opportunity of a decent managerial job?
I would be very surprised if Malky Mackay is not given a commitment, say, for 5 years, which I think would take us up to the end of the initial 10-year cycle. I'd be very surprised if he's not given a commitment to see it through. I think he understands that scenario. He understands that to get this opportunity in the face of everything we've discussed today and then jump ship at the first job that comes along, that would leave people questioning his character. I think he will have made a commitment to it. What we can't see, what we can't know is how the job unfolds in the 5 years. I'm sure Brian McClare had a commitment to it and it didn't last. I'm sure Mark Votta had a commitment to it and he lasted 3 years. So we don't know what's going to happen. But I think that as a matter of principle, I don't think Malky Mackay can jump ship at the first job that comes along, and I don't think he will. I think he will see this as a key moment in his career if he gets this job, because it will either be the path towards further rehabilitation or it won't be. And if he makes the wrong decision, then it won't be.
I mean, sorry, forgive me for laughing, but I mean, Richard, I agree with what you've said. 5 years. I mean, the guy's been punished enough, hasn't he, for what he's done? I mean, I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, Richard. I think if Malky Mackay gets this job, he owes the SFA big time. And he owes it to himself to say, do you know what? This is part of my rehab. I'm lucky to have this job and I'm going to do it. It would look terrible for me if he jumped ship after 12 months. But I must admit, Richard, I never imagined anything like 5 years. I thought 3 years would be doing well.
If I'm right, I may have got my sums wrong, but if I'm right, that takes us up to the end of the original 10-year. If you remember when Mark Votta came in and said, judge me in 10 years. Well, he lasted 3. Maybe Brian McClare didn't quite last 2. So I've put that 5-year figure in place. But it takes us to the end of that cycle when we were expecting to see a generation of players come through the performance schools and be in the Scotland squad.
I'd say it'll be
Mark, sorry, Tom. Just on that point, Richard, you might be there. Mark Votta said at that press conference launch something like he would like 1 in 5 of the graduates from the academies to play for Scotland. Some extraordinary figure. We were all taken aback by it. That's how ambitious he was.
But this is the pie in the sky aspect of that. Mark Votta could have plucked numbers out of the sky, knowing full well that he's never going to be around to be judged on them. He could say in 10 years' time, the entire Scotland team is going to be made up of kids that have come out of this system. And there's going to be tons more all around the country. He's never going to be around. He's gone out the door. It doesn't matter whether he fails or not, and he has failed. And Brian McClare failed. And I think Malky Mackay is going to have to be an extraordinary amalgam of politician, negotiator, visionary to make any progress.
Starting tomorrow, Tom. What on earth
Yeah.
can he say when he sits down, as we expect, in front of the media, and he's going to get all sorts of questions fired at him?
Yeah.
How does he convince? I know what you're saying. There are people out there that he'll never be able to convince.
Yeah.
How does he convince the moderates, say, that he is the right man? He's worth a second chance.
He just needs to speak from the heart, and show that he is sorry for his sins and that he has learned from them and that he's a better person. That's all he can say. What else can he say? You know, you get to a point where there's no more that he can say. There's literally nothing else that he can say bar what he has said. And, you know, at that point, he's got to say to people, well, look, you either accept this or you don't.
I think he has convinced a lot of the moderates, but there's a large constituency out there who are highly unconvinced. And as I said earlier, they regard it as perfectly reasonable, balanced people. Let's not castigate them as zealots or bigots. Reasonable people who regard it as a deplorable decision.
But the truth of the matter, the public really, in this job, it really doesn't matter what they think.
What's important, Kenny, is he has the wherewithal and the ability to do this job really well. I'm struggling to see evidence for that. But I suspect tomorrow, as he's proved in this studio,
right,
I bet you Malky Mackay will speak strongly
about it.
Convince him, Barry.
Convince him. Tell him why Malky Mackay is the right man for this job.
Well, I know him personally. I've spoke to him on the phone. That's all I can say, really, in terms of how enthusiastic he was about wanting this job. Now, I don't know whether the reason is he can't get another job or whatever, but I do think he's at a good age. He's 44, Malky, I think, just turned 44. He's still young and he's driven, and he obviously wants to make a change to Scottish football, and we need somebody like this. We need somebody like him coming in.
Barry, the problem with that, Barry, is that's unspecific.
I know, but
we could be specific about why he's a good football manager.
I know he's never been involved in the youth side of football. He's always been a first-team manager.
But it's also,
I can see your point.
It's also a different job from that. And what I would say, Graham, and you're right, you look at Malky's career, you can't say, well, he did that there, so therefore he's ideally suited for this. But there's nobody. This job doesn't really exist in any other realm. I mean, if you're a technical director at a club, there will be some aspects of it that overlap. And Scottish football is not tripping over with technical directors. There's one at Hearts. That's about it. And it was never going to be Craig Levein in this role. Yeah. Although if there's anybody in Scottish football who's showed he knows how to build an infrastructure and get a working youth system in place, it's Craig Levein. But still, there aren't a lot of people who do this role. And the majority of the folk who were linked with the job were all coaches who've either worked at senior or youth level. And it's not a coaching job. I don't think there's any Scot out there who has done this job before and you could say with any certainty, well, he's succeeded there, so he'll succeed here. There are more in England and there are more in other sports, and I know at the outset there were people from other sports who expressed an interest in the job. But then you've got the whole closed shop of football people don't want to be told what to do with someone who's not involved in football.
I'm not convinced by that. I think there's a kind of cerebral, slight academic slant that might be applied to this. For example, I would imagine a young Andy Roxburgh would be quite good at this job. I can imagine a young Craig Brown would be quite good at this job. If you want to include the here and now, I can imagine Ian Cathro might be quite good at this job. He's got that kind of mentality, that kind of outlook. In that context, I can't see what Malky Mackay's got. Barry talks about enthusiasm, and he seems to be a smashing guy, Malky Mackay.
Who else is out there? Who else is out there?
What is the specific? What is the distinct that says to us, that's why Malky Mackay will be good at this? I can't see it.
I don't know him well enough to comment on that, but I take your point absolutely. Malky Mackay is not going to go anywhere in this job unless there's buy-in from the people across the other side of the table. Are people open to change? I don't think they are open to change. Enough of them in this country for Malky Mackay to go anywhere.
Well, I mean, I was at the SFA convention a few weeks ago. I think the mood around that time was some of the lower league clubs were a little bit put out that they'd read about it in the paper, and the communication process hadn't been the way they saw it. From speaking to people about it, there's a greater openness to change now than there was 5 years ago.
Right,
that exists.
Let me just get a few more of the texts and tweets. And someone saying here, all these self-righteous fans, have they never sung a distasteful song before? Andrew in Northumberland, give Malky a break. Think it's a great appointment getting a top coach. And Bob in Perth, I've nothing against Mackay getting another chance, but the point made about Hugh Dallas shows the double standards of an organisation that has done nothing positive for our game. And perhaps that's the biggest issue tomorrow. is, do you expect someone from the SFA to sit alongside him and explain the decision? Can you see? Should they do that?
Absolutely, Stuart Regan.
Stuart Regan should do that.
I'm sure you will. You'll have to outline why Malky Mackay was the man. But sometimes when I hear some of the more extreme views that you've read out tonight, I wonder how much of this is genuine upset and disgust about Malky Mackay's misdemeanours, and how much it is the age-old seizing of an opportunity to give the SFA a kicking. I wonder what's the split there.
Listen, let's give him the job and let's judge him 2 or 3 years down the line. That's what we've been talking about. Who do we give the job? Malky's never been in this sort of setup before. Let's see how he does and judge him.
But that is a difficult thing, isn't it, Graham? How we judge him in a role like
yes.
this.
I mean,
see what changes he makes when he comes in.
It's almost certainly going to appoint him.
Do you think he'll get the chance to make changes?
He's got to make.
Yeah, there's changes on the table. Whether
How
it's
quickly will we see them?
2018. It's whether it's a reserve league, fewer academies, colt teams, all these kind of things.
What are you saying? Here we go. What?
There we go. There's another 18 months away before we get another change. Let's make change now.
He's got to have the power to bring his own influence on it. So of course they've got this programme they're rolling out. He's got to have his own authority to bring his own influence.
It's Stuart Regan's listening. We've got 15. So what would you say to him? You're thumping your hand in the desk there. What would you say? You're frustrated. We need to get things moving.
Yeah, we need to change. Just said there, 18 months, 2018. Let's change it now. Give Malky the job tomorrow. See what's happening, and then the turn of the year, let's change. Get back to the system that produced a hell of a lot of players 15, 20 years ago.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, you can receive all the latest sports news in our daily bulletins on Radio Scotland and at our website, bbc.co.uk/sportscotland.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.